She hadn't opened her eyes in 6 days, and then just before the end she did. We had already started to say goodbye. The nurses said she could still hear us, but by then her body had gone quiet, still breathing, still warm, but gone in all the ways that mattered. Until the 7th night. That night when the machines hummed softly and I thought she was already halfway gone, her eyes opened, just for a moment, just long enough, to say one sentence. And I haven't stopped thinking about it since. She was the loudest presence in any room, so when she went silent, it was unbearable. My mother wasn't a quiet woman. She laughed like thunder and spoke like she had something to prove to the whole world. She had opinions about everything, and she never waited to be asked. She loved red lipstick, cheap coffee, and dancing barefoot in the kitchen, even when there was no music playing. She could win an argument, fix a flat tire, and hug you hard enough to bruise your ribs, all in the same afternoon. And when I say she was the center of our world, I don't mean that lightly. You could feel her before she entered a room. You could miss her before she even left. She had that kind of gravity. So when the illness came, when it started stripping away the volume in her voice, the sharpness in her jokes, the energy in her steps, it wasn't just hard. It was terrifying. It started small. She forgot where she put her keys, missed a few appointments. We laughed about it, even joked that she was getting forgetful like her mother. But then came the missed meds, the strange bruises she couldn't explain, the confusion, the ER visit, the scans, glioblastoma, brain tumor, aggressive, inoperable, fast. From diagnosis to decline, it felt like someone pressed fast forward on our lives and then threw the remote off a cliff. She stayed strong at first. Of course she did. She made jokes, cursed at the doctors, even wore a wig that looked like a neon pink lion's mane just to freak out the nurses. But behind her eyes, I could see it. She was scared, and I was too. Near the end, she couldn't walk. Then she couldn't eat. Then she stopped speaking. Finally, she closed her eyes and didn't open them for 6 days. That's when we were told she was transitioning. It's the word hospice uses when they mean, start saying goodbye. We did. My brother flew in. My aunt held her hand. I sat next to her day after day, reading old letters, playing her favorite music, whispering things I never had the guts to say when she was awake. And every time I paused, I hoped for something. A twitch, a breath, a blink. But she stayed, still until the 7th night, the night everything changed. No one tells you how loud silence can be, especially when you're waiting for a goodbye that may never come. The days in hospice blurred together. We lived by the rhythm of machines, beeps, IV drips, monitors that whispered the language of decline. I slept in the chair beside her bed, legs curled under me, jacket as a pillow. The nurses came in like ghosts, soft, calm, kind. They whispered when they spoke, as if sound itself might break the fragile thread holding her here. I'd never sat so long with someone who wasn't speaking. Never learned how to keep someone company while they were fading. I read her books she used to love, played her favorite old soul records, and told her stories from when I was little. Even the ones I never told her when she was awake, like the time I stole her car keys at 15 just to impress a girl. Or how I used to sneak into her closet to smell her perfume whenever I missed her as a kid. I spoke into the silence because I didn't know what else to do. And still, she didn't move. My brother visited, but only stayed a few hours. He couldn't handle it, said it was too much to see her like that, and quiet, still not her. I didn't blame him, I just stayed. I told her everything I needed to say. I forgave her for being tough on me. I thanked her for never letting me give up when I wanted to drop out. I apologized for being distant the last few years. I told her I loved her. Every day, I whispered it over and over. I needed her to hear it, even if she couldn't say it back. By the 6th day, I stopped hoping she'd open her eyes. I just hoped she was comfortable, that maybe somewhere inside she was still there, still listening. That night I sat beside her, holding her hand. Her fingers were cold. Her skin was thin, papery, almost translucent. I remember staring at the small rise and fall of her chest and realizing I could measure time in breaths. The world outside kept going. Traffic, emails, people making dinner, kids doing homework. But inside that room, everything was frozen. There was only her and me and everything I hadn't said soon enough. And then somewhere after midnight, I leaned back in my chair, closed my eyes for just a moment, and heard something I hadn't heard in days. A breath, different, sharper. I opened my eyes, and she was looking at me. Her voice was barely a breath, but I'll remember those words until my last one. Her eyes were open, wide, not cloudy, not lost, just there, like she'd never left. Like she'd only been asleep and now she had something she needed to say before time slipped away again. I froze. For a moment I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. I was scared that if I blinked, it would vanish, that it was a trick of light or hope or grief playing games with my head. But then she blinked once, and her lips moved. Her mouth was dry. I could hear it. The words caught in her throat, like they were fighting for space between pain and time. I leaned in close, held her hand tighter and whispered, "Mom, I'm here, it's okay." She tried again. Her voice came out cracked and barely audible, less than a whisper, more like breath shaped into meaning. And then she said it. 5 words. "I didn't forget your birthday." That's what she chose. That's what she used. Her last strength to say. And I swear to you, I didn't understand, not at first, not until her eyes, still open, began to fill with tears. Not until I saw her lip tremble. Not until I remembered that year. The year I turned 25. The year she missed it. I'd called her. She didn't answer. I sent a message. She never replied. It was the first time in my life she didn't say, "Happy birthday." No card, no call, nothing. And I told myself it didn't matter. That I was an adult now. That birthdays were for kids. That it was just a mistake. But it did matter. Because it was the year my life was falling apart. I was broke, heartbroken, lost. I needed her more than ever, and she was silent, and I held on to that silence for years, let it build, let it harden. I forgave her out loud, but not inside. And now, here she was, in her final moment of lucidity, in the brief flicker of life that was left, she chose to say that. "I didn't forget your birthday." It wasn't just about a date, it was her way of saying, "I was there. I've always been there." Even when she couldn't show it, even when she failed, she saw my hurt, she carried it, and she used her last breath to give it back to me, softer. I squeezed her hand and said, I know, Mom." She exhaled slowly. And then she closed her eyes again for the last time. The room got quiet again, but something in me wouldn't stop echoing. She didn't speak again after that. Her eyes closed gently, like the effort had cost everything she had left. The machines kept going for a few more hours, beeping, tracking, breathing for her. But I knew that moment was the last time she was truly there. I stayed by her side, watching every breath like it was a countdown, and when the line went flat, I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I didn't fall apart. I just sat there holding her hand like I had for 7 days, but this time, it wasn't warm. The nurse came in. She was kind, gentle. She touched my shoulder and asked if I needed anything. I shook my head. There was nothing left to ask for. They unplugged the machines, removed the tubes, folded the blankets, and just like that, she was gone. Not just from the room, but from the world. From every future birthday, every late-night phone call, every piece of advice I would still need, but would now have to imagine. The hallway outside was still. The sun had just started to rise, casting that soft golden light that makes everything feel like a memory. I looked around the room, and for the first time in days, it felt empty, really empty. And yet those 5 words kept bouncing around in my chest like an echo I couldn't stop hearing. "I didn't forget your birthday." It played on loop, not because it hurt, but because it healed. I realized then that she Didn't have to say I love you. She didn't need to apologize. She didn't need to explain the silences, the missed moments, the walls we built. She saw me. She remembered. And in the end, that was more than I ever thought I'd get. Grief didn't come like a tidal wave. It came in pieces, in the quiet car ride home, in the half-finished crossword puzzle still on her nightstand, in the voicemail she left me months ago that I hadn't deleted, in the smell of her perfume still clinging to the scarf I accidentally brought home. Everything was louder without her, because she had always been the one to fill the room. Now it was my job to carry her voice, and those 5 words, they were a map back to her. Maybe that one sentence wasn't just about a birthday. Maybe it was about everything she couldn't bring herself to say. The more I thought about it, the more I realized she didn't just wake up to talk about a forgotten day on the calendar. That sentence, those 5 shaky words, they were loaded. I didn't forget your birthday. They carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken things. Maybe it was her way of saying, I remember you. You mattered. I wasn't perfect, but I tried. I never stopped loving you, even when I didn't know how to show it. She wasn't a sentimental woman. She wasn't cold, but she wasn't one to gush either. She showed love through action, packing lunches, ironing shirts, calling you 3 times in one day just to make sure you were eating. And maybe, like so many of us, she thought those things spoke for themselves, but they didn't. And that's where the silence crept in. When we argued, she'd go quiet. When I moved out, she didn't cry. When I called less and less, she never asked why. We both avoided the uncomfortable parts of our relationship because we didn't want to make it worse. But silence has a way of growing roots. I never told her how much it hurt that she didn't show up for that birthday. She never told me why she missed it. But now I think she did remember. She always remembered. She just didn't know how to cross the distance between us until she had no choice but to try, until the clock was running out, until 5 words were all she had left to give. And somehow, they were enough. That's the thing about final moments. You think you want something profound and a life lesson, a confession, a grand gesture. But what you really want is something true. Something that tells you that you were seen, that you were loved, that you weren't just part of someone's life, you were their life. And when she said those words, I felt it. She knew. She had always known. Even if she didn't always say it, even if she forgot to call, even if she messed up the big things, she remembered me. And she wanted me to remember that. She didn't just leave me those words. She left me everything they meant. She said 5 words before she left, but now everything she ever did speaks. After she was gone, the world didn't stop. But my vision of it did. Suddenly, everything became a memory. Her handwriting on the grocery list stuck to the fridge. The chipped mug she used every morning for coffee. The stack of recipe cards in the drawer written in her shorthand no one else could read but me. And for the first time in my life, I realized that she'd been speaking to me all along. Not in birthday cards or heart-to-hearts, but in repetition. In the way she always folded my laundry with the shirts turned right side out. In how she'd call me before big storms, reminding me to charge your phone and fill your tank. In how she'd check my tires every time I visited, like that, was part of loving someone. I used to roll my eyes at it. Now I replay it like a symphony. I remember waking up for school as a kid, the sound of her humming in the kitchen. I remember how she used to brush my hair so gently it made me sleepy. I remember how she'd put her hand on my chest when I had a fever, never saying anything, just staying there, like her palm could fight off whatever was trying to take me down. Back then, I didn't think of it as love. I thought it was just her being mom, but now I know that was her language. Her love wasn't poetry. It wasn't handwritten letters or long emotional speeches. It was action. It was presence. It was in the doing. I used to think she didn't understand me, that I was too sensitive, too different, too distant, but now I see. Maybe she felt the same way. Maybe she thought I didn't see her. And maybe that final sentence, that birthday she never forgot, was her last chance to say, I saw you, I loved you, I was trying the whole time. Now when I pass the cinnamon at the grocery store, I remember how she put it in everything, even chili. When I see red lipstick, I hear her laugh. When I fold a towel, I copy her corners. Tight. Clean, symmetrical. The little things speak now, and they're louder than anything she ever said out loud. She gave me a goodbye in 5 words. But the rest of her, she left in all the details. I spent so much time trying to understand her. I didn't realize how much of her was already in me. It hit me a few weeks later, not in some grand cinematic moment, but in something so small I almost missed. I was in the kitchen making breakfast. My son was sitting at the table, half awake, hair a mess, complaining about school like the world was ending. I poured his cereal, put it in front of him. Then, without thinking, I reached out and brushed his bangs out of his face, and it stopped me cold because that's exactly what she used to do to me. That gentle, wordless gesture, like she was checking if I had a fever or just reminding me she was there. I hadn't planned it. I hadn't even realized I knew how to do it that way. But my hands did. Her hands did. And in that moment, I saw her. In me. Not in my face or my voice or my laugh, though those are hers too. But in my rhythm, in my reflexes, in the way I show up for the people I love, in the way I worry quietly and double-check if the doors are locked and make sure there's an extra charger in the car just in case. I used to think she didn't teach me how to love, but now I realize she taught me without saying a word, and I've been speaking that language ever since. I see her in the way I listen when someone's crying but can't explain why. In the way I never leave a family gathering without making sure everyone got home safe. In how I fold napkins, write lists, hum while doing dishes. She's everywhere in me, not just in memory, but in motion. And the older I get, the more I realize I didn't just inherit her eyes or her stubbornness. I inherited her way of loving, her way of protecting, her way of showing up without needing credit or attention. That was her legacy. That, and 5 words whispered at the edge of goodbye. I didn't forget your birthday. No, Mom, you didn't forget anything. You just loved in a language it took me a lifetime to learn. And now that I finally speak it, I hear you everywhere. I used to carry grief like weight. Now I carry her like light. There was a time when I thought grief was supposed to be heavy, that it had to feel like a stone on your chest, a lump in your throat, a silence you couldn't break. I thought it was something you endured, survived, got through. I didn't realize it could change form, from ache to memory, from shadow to warmth. But after she left, something shifted. I stopped waiting for the pain to fade, and instead I started listening for her in the quiet, in the hum of the kettle, in the creak of the stairs she used to rush down, in the smell of cinnamon on Sunday mornings, in the way my son says, "You okay, Dad?" The same way she used to ask it, like he already knows the answer but just wants me to hear the question. I used to think her not saying certain things meant they weren't true. Now I know better. Love doesn't always speak loudly. Sometimes it's in the background. Sometimes it's between the lines, and sometimes it only makes sense once someone's gone. She didn't leave me broken. She left me full of stories, of habits, of gestures I didn't know were hers until I caught myself doing them. And now when I talk about her, I don't start with the sickness. I don't start with the silence. I start with the laugh. The way she made everything feel like home even if the walls were cracked. I start with that final sentence, those 5 imperfect words that did more than a lifetime of almosts. I didn't forget your birthday. I don't replay it because I need to. I replay it because it's a reminder that even in the end, we still have the power to reach each other, even through the fog, even through the silence, even through the years we thought were wasted. She reached. Me and I carry that forward, not as a scar, but as a spark. She gave me life once, and somehow she gave it to me again. Sometimes all it takes is one sentence to turn a goodbye into a beginning. I used to wish for one last conversation, one more chance to say what I never said, to ask what I never asked. But now I know I got something even rarer. I got the sentence she chose. Out of everything she could have said, as out of every word she had stored in her for a lifetime, she chose those 5. And in that moment, she wasn't just my mother. She was a woman who had carried regret, a woman who had felt my pain, a woman who remembered the one thing I thought she forgot, and she wanted me to know that I was never forgotten, never invisible, never unloved, not even in silence. Now I say it often, to my son, to my partner, to myself, because no one should have to wait until the end to hear the one thing they needed most. If you still have time, use it, say it, even if your voice shakes, even if it's messy, even if it's late, because one sentence, just one, can change everything. If you've ever held someone's hand and hoped for just one more word, this story was for you, at Sal. The quiet goodbye. We share the moments no one talks about, the fragile truths, the missed words, the echoes that never fade. Subscribe and stay with us, because sometimes one sentence is enough to change everything.